What if I told you an alien spacecraft might be headed towards Earth this November? Sounds like science fiction, right? But according to Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, it could be a scientific fact. Discovered by Atlas Telescope in Hawaii, 30i Atlas is a newly detected interstellar object, only the third ever spotted, zipping through our solar system on a highly unusual trajectory. Some scientists believe it's just a rock, but Avi Loeb sees something far more intriguing. In this episode, I sit down with Avi Loeb to talk about why he thinks 30i Atlas might be intelligently guided, how it compares to ʻOumuamua, a mysterious object he famously proposed could be an alien artifact, and what happens if this new visitor suddenly disappears behind the sun and reappears on a direct course towards Earth. Could this be contact? Is it time to prepare for a conversation with something not from here? Let's find out. Join us as we get rebelliously curious. Avi, it is such a pleasure to have you back on Rebelliously Curious. I have been wanting to talk to you for the past week or so since we've known about 3i Atlas headed potentially towards Earth. I was at the Monroe Institute last week and I had people asking me about it. And I said, well, I'm not sure yet. I said, I have to talk to the man that would know more info than I would. But first of all, before we get into what is 3i Atlas, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This object was discovered on July 1st, 2025, and I actually was interviewed that night on Coast to Coast, and one of the listeners emailed me about it, and so I followed it from the beginning, from the start. It was just a candidate back then. But the one remarkable thing that immediately came to my mind is that it was discovered at a distance of 4.5 times the Earth-Sun separation, and it was found by a 0.5 meter telescope, meaning that it was relatively bright for its distance. And I did an immediate calculation that implied that if it's a solid object, it's 20 kilometers in diameter. And the previous objects that came from outside the solar system were at the level of hundreds of meters in size. And based on the rocks in the solar system in our backyard, there are hundreds of thousands of objects that are the size of the first interstellar object, ʻOumuamua, 100 meters or so, for every object that is 20 kilometers. So we haven't found 100,000 ʻOumuamuas before we found this one. We found ʻOumuamua, and then Borisov, and then this one. And Borisov was also a few hundred meters. And so what's going on? How can it be so big? And then I realized on the 4th of July, while my wife took me for a vacation, I had to write this paper, and she was very generous, allowed me to write it, where I did a calculation of how much rocky material might be in interstellar space. And I found that such a giant rock that is 20 kilometers in diameter should be delivered to the inner solar system once per 10,000 years. And we found it after 1 decade or so of observing the sky.
Wow.
So that's peculiar. If it's a rock, it must be much smaller. So one possibility is that it's less than a kilometer, 20 times smaller. And in that case, it doesn't carry as much mass. And then the brightness may be explained if there is a large cloud of dust around it. So the dust reflects sunlight, and we think it's big, but it's not really big. So I wrote this paper saying 3i Atlas is smaller or rarer than we thought, because the second possibility is that if it's that big, it actually did not come at a random trajectory. It was targeting the inner solar system. And that obviously opens the door for it being technological, because who would target the inner solar system? It must be some intelligence. Now, I submitted this paper for publication. It was accepted by the editor under one condition, that I'll remove any reference to a possible technological origin. The editor was Chris Lintott, who is from Oxford University, who later made the statement to the New York Post that this is nonsense on stilts. And it's an insult to everyone that is working on this object to even suggest a technological origin.
That's unbelievable. And let's get into that because I think that we're looking at all these new findings that are coming out almost daily, right? You know, we look at your Medium blog that you've been posting on consistently. And, you know, one of the things is looking at the solar telescope, right? Or the SOAR telescope in Chile right now that's talking about, you know, there's no evidence of cometary gases. So can we talk a little bit about that and then the recent
Yeah.
findings that have come out this past day or two?
Yeah, exactly. So there were several teams, by now maybe four, that tried to take a spectrum of this object, and they didn't find any spectral fingerprints of molecules that are often found in cometary tails. These are carbon-based molecules or oxygen atoms. And where are these atoms or molecules? We don't see them. And moreover, yesterday, the Hubble Space Telescope released, image was analyzed in a paper, detailed paper, and from that image, it looks like there is no tail. That was already apparent from previous images that other telescopes took, but instead, what we see is that there is glow ahead of the object. That is unprecedented. We usually call comets because there is a cometary tail behind them, and that distinguishing feature is not there. It's just like, identifying zebras by their stripes. And if you see an animal that doesn't have stripes, you can't say it's a zebra because that is the defining characteristic. Nevertheless, most astronomers argue, oh, it's a comet, but in fact, maybe it's evaporating only in front of it, and because that's the illuminated side. But that's true of many other comets that are illuminated by the sun, and yet they show that a trail of gas and dust behind them. And the reason is that the solar irradiation is pushing the dust particles backwards and creating this cometary tail appearance. But in this case, we just see a glow in front of the object. And moreover, it looks like the trajectory of this object is remarkable. And I wrote another paper just on that. So when my sentence was taken out about a design trajectory, I decided to co-author a paper just dedicated to that. A full paper with the title is 3I Atlas Alien Technology, because that's the kind of person I am. If you try to suppress a thought that is out of the box, then I will try and make a full paper out of that thought. And that was my response to this editor. And this paper, by the way, became viral. The New York Post wrote about it. And then a lot of other reporters wrote about it, and it became the most discussed trending item on Twitter, and on X, every second or so there was a tweet about that or me. And the basic point is that we also realize that the trajectory of this object is very fine-tuned. It's aligned with the orbital plane of the planets around the sun. And the chance of that happening at random, it's within 5 degrees of that plane, the ecliptic plane, the chance is 1 in 500. That's extremely small. But beyond that, even if you adapt this trajectory and you say, oh, that's a chance alignment, it wasn't really planned, it's 1 in 500, but maybe, things happen sometimes that appear to be rare. This is only the third interstellar object, and we didn't have 500 tries, but maybe at the level of 1% likelihood it's not very unlikely. But then what you find is you take that trajectory and you randomly choose the arrival time of this object. Okay, you just change the arrival time, and you find that only in 1 in 20,000 cases it gets as close as it does to to Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. So these are three planets, and they are moving around the sun. And this object, if you just look at the video that shows its trajectory, it just arrives at the right place at the right time to be next to Jupiter when Jupiter is there, next to Mars when Mars is there, next to Venus when Venus is there. And the Earth is very different. It arrives closest to the sun when the Earth is on the opposite side. So we can't observe it. And coming closest to the sun is the point in time when it can do a maneuver. Because when we send a spacecraft, we often take advantage of the gravitational assist from the sun, coming close to the sun and getting a boost in the velocity as a result of that. And that's the best place to do a maneuver. And here it will be a reverse maneuver, perhaps slowing down. And if this object ends up not following the path that we anticipate after it passes close to the sun on October 29th, 2025, my guess is that the stock market will crash.
Wow. Well, fair enough. And here's the question that we've all been asking. Are we ready for this? Right. And lots of people say we are.
I
And
don't
think we are. I agree with you, Avi. I don't think we're ready for it. Yeah.
So there are several aspects to answering this question. Are we ready? One has to do with the scientific community. This possibility is completely ridiculed, as I mentioned, not taken seriously. And here I'm talking about data. And I explained this morning on CNN that you shouldn't decide about the validity of ideas based on authority, based on how many likes the idea gets on social media or among the tribe, the group of people that you belong to. It should be decided by data, because no question should be censored in science. Science is not about censoring questions that you might think have a simple answer. Science is about asking all questions and raising all possibilities, and then answering those questions and deciding which possibility is right based on data. That's the key. The scientific method is allowing everyone to raise possibilities. Nothing should be censored, and then collecting the data to demonstrate which possibility is right. That is the scientific method. Instead, what you see is people not allowing to raise possibilities that are away from the beaten path. And the second thing that I would like to say after this interview this morning is that there is a simple way to tell the difference between a conspiracy theorist, or if you want also a dogmatist, and a genuine scientist. How do you tell the difference between them? By giving them more data. A conspiracy theorist or a dogmatist would be alarmed the more data you give them, because it may violate their theory. A genuine scientist would be thrilled to have as much data as possible, because the objective is to figure out what reality is. Okay? And the more data you have, the easier it is to figure out. Even if there are anomalies, they teach us. Science is a learning experience. We shouldn't assume we know the answer in advance. We should be curious. And it's a lot of fun to figure things out. Just like kids enjoy figuring the world. When they don't know the world, the adults in the room tell them everything. But very often kids say, I don't want to listen to you. I want to figure it out myself. This is pretty much the approach that I take in doing my science. I want to figure it out based on data and evidence. And if this object is glowing ahead of its motion, not having a tail, if this object has a very fine-tuned trajectory that passes near many planets during this journey and is opposite to the position of the Earth relative to the sun at closest approach, then I say we should get as much data as possible about it, because it looks strange. And I also suggested more than a week ago to establish a new scale. Now it's called the Loeb scale. There was a paper that I co-authored that calls it the Loeb scale, where 0 is an interstellar object that looks natural based on data. It looks just like the rocks we have seen before in the solar system, an asteroid or a comet. That's 0 because it poses no threat to our existence if it doesn't collide with Earth. But 10 would be an object that is definitely technological, that, for example, maneuvers as a result of propulsion or an engine. It has artificial lights or transmits signals that we detect. that indicate that it's definitely technological. And the reason we need this scale is in order to decide how to respond to it. There needs to be an international organization that assesses the value on this scale of any interstellar object that comes to our backyard. And now with the Rubin telescope, it should happen every few months. Instead of 3 objects over 8 years, the way we are used to until now the Rubin Observatory will increase the rate of detection by almost 100. So we would see one every few months, and we need to decide whether each of them is a rock, a natural rock, or perhaps could be technological. Because if it's technological, we need to decide what to do about it. It's like a visitor coming to our backyard, and we need to decide what to do, and we need to figure out the intent, the qualities of this visitor, how can we protect ourselves if it's a threat. And that should involve policymakers. It should be an international organization because the aliens don't care how we split territories on this rock, the Earth that we are born on.
I want to say one thing, and because I think it's so important that what you're saying right now when it comes to policy and international collaboration, why isn't the United Nations saying anything? I know they have a lot to deal with right now, obviously what's going on around the world and other internal conflicts happening, but places like the United Nations and their space administration side have been totally quiet to all of this and still have been. I've emailed them, I've messaged them myself consistently before 3i Atlas decided to appear, but there has been nothing. And policy does need to be made, or collaboration does need to be made, or a standard form of how do we communicate if this is an extraterrestrial life form of any degree, or NHI, or something that's intelligently piloted.
Yeah, I do believe that we need a wake-up call. We are sort of asleep on the wheel right now. And the wake-up call will come when we see an object that behaves in ways that we didn't anticipate, that may be technological. And then, of course, everyone would be on the ball. We have to keep our eyes on that ball. And so, of course, there needs to be a new sense of alert to this. Now, if the US government or any other government has data that indicates that we were already visited in the past, then of course that should be considered. But what I'm saying is that new interstellar objects will show up, and we should check them. And eventually, there should be psychologists that help in terms of designing how to communicate the message to the public without creating panic and without letting the economies melt down as a result of that, because citizens might feel that they're not being protected.
You're right. And SETI's created some form of a guideline, I believe, on this type of communication. They've even done art projects right now that they're looking at if there was an extraterrestrial communication, how would we be able to decode it? I've done interviews on this. I've written feature stories around that. So SETI, is a really great lead for it, but we don't see other people in policymakers. We don't see other governments. And now here's the question. Once we figure out in the end of October that this trajectory from the sun is coming towards Earth, how many days do we have, or hours do we have, until it shows up that we can actually see it on the planet?
Well, if it's
like from the eye, from a naked eye, I should say, not a telescope. Yeah.
Well, one possibility is that it's a mothership that releases mini probes that visit various planets. And if those mini probes move at a similar speed to 3i Atlas, then it would take a few months before they reach Earth. Okay, and we should see some enhanced activity in Earth's atmosphere as a result of that. And of course, I'm leading the Galileo observatories that are monitoring Earth routinely, and we are building now, assembling 2 new observatories, one in Pennsylvania, another one in Nevada, and we will check the sky. I mean, we expect to detect millions of objects in the sky over a year, and we shall see if there is anything anomalous about them. But overall, there needs to be more awareness to this new era that we are entering, and that's what I'm trying to bring to the attention of people. That I hope that I will encourage observers to try and prove me wrong, that it's actually a comet. And if 3i Atlas is a comet, so be it. but then we need to pay as much attention to future objects that come to our backyard.
I know we've talked about this in the past, and you have about Oumuamua and the ability to potentially land on Oumuamua. That would have been potentially an alien artifact. If this is the same case that it's an alien artifact, would we have the ability to be able to then look at it, observe it, if it's staying within our solar system for a longer period of time, to be able to actually land on it, drill in it, excavate it? Would that be something you'd recommend, or something that we're might not be a great recommendation depending on where we're at?
So this object first came from the direction of the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which is very crowded with stars, perhaps for a reason for us not to be able to recognize it when it's far away.
Right.
It just appeared as one of these stars, was not moving across the sky very fast, but as it came closer, it was recognized. And at that point, when it was discovered in July, it was too late for us to actually design a rocket that will reach it or intercept with it along its path, because it's actually moving opposite to the direction of motion of the Earth around the sun. And when it comes closest to the sun, it would move at 98 kilometers per second speed, which is 3 times bigger than the fastest rocket that we can use. So we won't be able to launch anything from Earth. But that led me to write another paper where I suggested using the spacecraft Juno that is currently orbiting Jupiter, because this object, as I mentioned, is destined to pass close to Jupiter if it doesn't change course. And actually Juno was the plan was to push it into Jupiter in the middle of September 2025. It was supposed to end the mission and end its life and burn up inside Jupiter. And I said, well, maybe we should push it away from Jupiter rather than into Jupiter, because if we give it a sufficient kick, it could intercept the path of 3I Atlas when it comes close to Jupiter in the middle of March 2026. And if you give the kick around mid-September, when we were supposed to destroy Juno, then that would be a perfect arrangement. Now, the question is how much fuel we have left in Juno's engine, and I'm discussing it with Juno's team. But actually, a day after I wrote this paper, I had a phone call from Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna, who wanted me to give her an update about 3I Atlas. And while giving her the update, I mentioned the opportunity to use Juno, and she was very excited about that and wrote a letter to the NASA administrator, Duffy, encouraging NASA to consider that possibility and evaluate how much fuel they have and how close Juno can get to 3I Atlas. We did the calculation where we show, as a function of the amount of fuel, how close can Juno get. And it has a lot of different instruments on it that could allow us to get a much better sense of what the 3I Atlas is, something we can't do from a distance from Earth right now.
Right. That's a great idea. Right. To observe it and to understand and maybe understand even if we should give it a kick or not, depending on what we're kicking, I guess it is.
Yeah.
But I
Well,
would, yeah, go ahead.
I would love to actually, if I had the, in the last week of my life, if I had the opportunity to ride a spacecraft like Juno, I would love to be on it as it intercepts an interstellar object. And even if it crashes on it, the view must be spectacular. This interstellar object, irrespective whether it's technological or natural in origin, went through space for billions of years, came from another star. It's just something that we've never seen. And it's a better view than what we see in 2001 Space Odyssey. And that was planned to be in 2001. Now we are 2025. But, it's one of those opportunities. I think if NASA manages to use Juno, it will capture the public's imagination. But I'm also discussing with other people the possibility of launching a rocket from Earth that would intercept the trajectory of 3I Atlas later in 2026, after it passes close to Jupiter. That will cost about $500 million, but some people have that cash. And so the question is whether it will happen.
Let's maybe see if Jeff Bezos will. He apparently has the money for it. I want to break down the pictures and the images that we've seen within media because I think that it's important for people to understand that some of the images we look at your Medium blog where you're writing and consistently updating, which is so fabulous because it's coming from source, right? Which is great and people can follow it and media can. And there's so much accuracy to it from a scientific perspective. But then we do obviously get like tabloid magazines picking up things and using different images. So the images that we do see on your Medium blog are very much black and white or the telescope based images. But then we are seeing these ones where the craft looks like a craft, but it has multiple lights, it looks like it surrounding it. Can we break down those images and if there's some falsehood around that or where we're seeing them and where those images are coming from?
Well, the best images were obtained by the Hubble Space Telescope because it's in space and you don't
Right.
have the atmosphere blurring the image. So that's the best one we have, but the best is yet to come from the Webb telescope. They might have taken already the data, but we haven't seen it publicly. And those are telescopes in space that get the highest angular resolution and they can inform us. The Webb telescope, in fact, could also see the heat emitted by the object because it's sensitive to infrared light and could tell us, the surface temperature of the object, the surface area of the object. We can also pinpoint the location of the object much better because the Webb telescope is 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth. It's in the Lagrange 2 point. And if we observe the object from Earth and from the Webb telescope, we can triangulate, we can figure out the position of 3I Atlas extremely precisely, and then monitor its motion and tell if there is any sign of propulsion or non-gravitational acceleration. That was the case in Oumuamua without it showing any cometary evaporation. And that was very puzzling. And I suggested that it may be pushed by reflecting sunlight. And the same telescope in Hawaii that discovered Oumuamua also discovered 3 years later another object that they called 2020 SO, which ended up actually being a rocket booster that was launched by NASA in 1966. It was pushed by reflecting sunlight. And the question is, who produced Oumuamua that may have been pushed by the same mechanism?
When we're looking at, their 3i Atlas and we get a better idea from it, we'll be able to figure out potentially where in deep space this might have come from, knowing its trajectory and knowing what its contents are made of, and maybe able to understanding what its lunar, or it's not lunar, but what its surface is and what its surface consists of.
Yeah, so with my student, we actually did a calculation going back in time and tracing where this object may have come from. And the thing is, the journey could have taken, 10 billion years. There are lots of stars along the path. You will not know where it came from unless you know the duration of the journey, the exact time that it started. And we might not have that. But my recommendation is in the future to design missions that could potentially land on interstellar objects, especially if they happen to not move too fast relative to Earth, if they happen to trail the Earth, or so that we can launch a rocket that would land on it, just like or have an array of spacecraft already positioned in space, so that the closest to the path of this interstellar object will actually get to it. And then bring a sample back to Earth, the way we did with the asteroid Bennu that was visited by the OSIRIS-REx spacecraft. And it brought back to Earth 120 grams of material from that asteroid, which was just a rock in the solar system. And when this material was analyzed in laboratories on Earth over the past year, it was realized that it carries most of the amino acids that make life as we know it on that rock in the solar system that perhaps had some water on it and was broken off a protoplanet. And I'm really curious, even if we have a rock that came from another star, I'm curious to see if the building blocks of life near that star might be found on an interstellar object that is just a rock, and whether those ingredients are the same as the building blocks of life on Earth as we know it. And that is a completely different approach to finding traces of primitive life near other stars. Right now, the astronomy community is focused on building the Habitable World Observatory that will cost more than $10 billion and look for the molecular fingerprints of microbes in the atmospheres of exoplanets far away. And even if we find oxygen, methane, water, and so forth, we will never know for sure if these molecules are produced by microbes or maybe geological process. But we also will never probe the forms of life themselves or their building blocks this way. However, if we detect the building blocks in a rock that arrived to our backyard from another star, we will be able to have a sample of the material. And that journey could have taken billions of years, for us to launch a rocket, a spacecraft that will reach another star and collect materials and bring it back. It's an impossible thing to imagine. But fortunately, these interstellar objects already made the journey, and now they arrive at our backyard. So there are two aspects. One, we can search for life on rocks in a way that was never attempted in astronomy. This was an idea that I had after 3I Atlas was discovered, and I think it's a very interesting way of studying the building blocks of life near other stars. But another point is, of course, if it ends up being technological and we land on it, then we have the opportunity to press a button, and learn about new technologies that we've never witnessed before. And all bets are off. I say it's not just a matter of time that other civilizations had more time than we had. We just had 1 century since quantum mechanics was discovered. And so, we're limited in the technologies we currently possess. It's not just that. They may have a bigger brain. Okay, so even if they had the same amount of time, maybe they're smarter than us. We might not be the smartest kid on the block. And if they're smarter than us, they would do things that we fail to understand, and we should allow for that. I mean, right now, my colleagues are arguing that imagining intelligent beings like us is an extraordinary claim. I don't see it as an extraordinary claim because there are billions of Earth-Sun analogs out there. And, it's just like seeing a lot of houses on the street that are similar to your house. And of course, they insist, okay, maybe these houses do not have any residents. Maybe they never had residents. It's an extraordinary claim to imagine residents. And I just think that, our existence is nothing exceptional, especially if you have billions of Earth-Sun analogs out there, that things like us existed for billions of years. It takes 1 billion years for Voyager to move to the opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy. There was plenty of time for their space products to reach us. And especially if they want to figure out what's going on here. There is this dark forest solution to Fermi's paradox, which basically says, Fermi asked, where is everybody? Well, they might be around, but they don't make a sound because they want to be silent out of fear from predators. And they're checking around to see who is making noises. We make a lot of noises. We broadcasted radio signals for a century. We are not really cautious in that regard. And if they notice us as a technological civilization that is young but developing really fast, that may be posing a threat to them, they might come and visit us. And that could be something like 3I Atlas on a reconnaissance mission.
You're right. And it would take centuries for technology to catch up. We go through industrial revolution, and really in the past 60 years, we've made such amazing technological advances. Literally in 60 years, what it would have taken centuries before, that it's not hard to believe that there might be someone else out there within, the galaxies within the cosmos that are doing the same thing we're doing or better, or not as well, right? There's obviously life that could be developing too. So I think it's just wild for us not to assume, this could be something. It could be an artifact. It could be, something that actually is carrying a form of life in it. We don't know. So we have to be open-minded. And the fact that if we're doing it, why aren't other people doing it too? Or other elements of life or whatever it might be doing it as well.
Yeah, so it's like being in a class, and realizing there are students that are better than we are, and we can pay attention to everyone. We can be really obsessed with microbes. That's fine, but frankly, I don't find microbes very inspiring. I would rather pay attention to the smartest kid in the class, because we can learn from those that are most accomplished. And, I had a visit by members of Christianity Today, a religious organization, and they asked me, if we find extraterrestrials, would that pose a threat to our religious beliefs? And I said, not at all. I have two daughters, and when the second one was born, it didn't take away from my love to the first one. So imagining that God can attend only to one civilization is like saying a parent can only take care of one child. And that's very demeaning, especially when you deal with God, but then it means that we might have a lot of siblings out there, and we might be jealous that one of these siblings is much more accomplished than we are. That's fine, but it shouldn't shake our belief in a parent, that. So they were very happy with this answer. I really think that it may bring humanity to a better place, similar to the idea that President Reagan voiced in the United Nations, that when there is an external threat, we might come together because we would realize that we are all in the same boat, and that we should cooperate. And that would be a good thing. It's like a messianic age that will arrive, where we might realize that instead of looking down at each other, we might look up. And it could bring a sense of cooperation and peace to Earth. That's really my hope. But we shall see. I mean, if that materializes, it really depends on what the data shows.
Here's the thing. I really truly feel that people around the world. We have really good people, we have bad people, then we have a very small percentage, I think, of evil people, right? And bad people can become good people, and good people can become bad people. But I don't really think it's our one-on-one relationships, right? I do blame immensely the industrial military complex for these ideologies that are consistently propelled and separating us and creating discrimination towards groups, and creating all of this, the horrible things that we're seeing right now around the world that are acting out. We look at investigative journalists and filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, who about 6 months ago did make a comment, and I'm not sure how I directly feel about this. It's kind of like, let's wait and see. But this comment that the industrial military complex or governments will be using this type of tactic, that an alien spaceship will be coming to Earth, that's actually some kind of ploy. What's your
Well,
views on that? Because
yeah. So
and it's very controversial, especially in this community. Yeah.
I was asked I on an interview in a podcast. They said that audience members believe that I floated this idea because in order to distract the public from the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Oh
And I
gosh.
try to explain, my response to that is, you can go to Amazon and buy a 0.5 meter telescope and look at the sky, and you will find this object. There is no way for me to fake this object. It was discovered by amateurs, by a telescope in Chile. It's observed by the Hubble Space Telescope, now also perhaps the Webb Telescope. And, it's a physical object far out. These telescopes would not see it if it was not real. And all I did was say, well, it looks a bit anomalous. Let's consider all possibilities, and has nothing to do with politics on Earth. Now, coming back to Corbell, I don't know what he was referring to. It must have to do with government. I'm not currently related to government. I'm just a scientist that is, working with data that is provided from telescopes. And that cannot be mixed with whatever has been done with respect to unidentified objects in the sky. That's a separate matter. And I don't know what the government knows. I was on May 1st, 2025, I was in Washington giving a briefing about unidentified anomalous phenomena, and mentioning the Galileo project, where we are now building two new observatories in Pennsylvania and Nevada. And a day before that, I was invited to visit the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office that was constructed in the Pentagon to to address the reports that came from the Director of National Intelligence. And so I asked people there whether they see anything unusual, and they said no. They said they have access to all the data within government, and in all those cases where data is good enough, they can recognize that the objects are human-made. And there are some reports from perhaps FBI agents, but they are not supported by data from instruments. That was the view I got from them. And then a day later, when I was in Congress, next to me sat Eric Davis, who argued that there are a dozen spacecraft that were retrieved from crash sites, and they have pilots that were found, and there are 4 species of pilots, and so these are contradictory reports. They cannot be both right. The view I heard the day before and the view I heard in Congress from Eric Davis. And the question is, who is telling us the truth? And I cannot decide without seeing the evidence. Okay, that's the only way I can make up my mind. And so far, I haven't seen the evidence. So I don't know what to say about it. One thing is, I don't care about stories. Stories, people can fabricate stories. They can tell, they can follow wishful thinking, or be misinformed, or just misinterpret whatever they witnessed. I want to see the actual factual evidence to support it. And that's my approach. And I very much hope that in the future we'll have clear evidence that will guide us on this matter. And if all objects happen to be human-made, then whatever we develop in the Galileo project will be helpful for the Department of Defense, because they can use the same type of sensors. They can use the artificial intelligence software that we developed to identify objects, and they can use it for the defense of the country. So I wouldn't feel that my time was wasted, because it would be useful. But if we find something extraterrestrial, then of course, that would be worth a Nobel Prize, and that's the cherry on top. But I was also asked whether I'm doing it to get the Nobel Prize, and I said not at all. Because if the search ends up fruitful and we find clear evidence for an extraterrestrial artifact, I would not waste my time going to Stockholm to get some prize from a group of people. I would like to dedicate all the time I have to figure it out, this thing that we encountered. And so I will basically follow Bob Dylan in not even paying attention to the prize.
Well, and if you did get it, it'd be rightfully deserved. I agree with you, Avi. I think that for sure people have testimony and things can be misunderstood, but and I do think testimony is important to a degree as well, but and it can be one data point. But you're right. In this case, when we're looking at understanding if the military industrial complex is telling us something different, I do think we do need to look to the science community to be able to tell us what potentially could be truth and fact around the things that we're seeing, like 3I Atlas.
Yeah.
This is why these merge of these worlds are happening right now in different degrees, that maybe we will find that bridge where we can, some people don't believe in science, which I think is wild, but maybe they'll change their mind when they realize that they're actually closer than we think they are, and that we need to give our scientists credit, because we wouldn't be around, let's be honest, if it wasn't for science. So, and
Yeah,
we wouldn't be living the lives we're living now if it wasn't that, and being able to track things like ʻOumuamua and 3I Atlas.
Yeah, and I think the public is very excited and interested in these matters. And also the call that I got from Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, that was asking about the science, I found it very rewarding, and that she really cares about it, and she recommended to NASA to check the Juno option of learning more about 3i Atlas. And I think in principle, policymakers and scientists can work together and figure it out. And I would love to help government figure it out if there is any clear evidence that something that is not natural is out there, and something that ranks on the scale of 10 in the Loeb scale of the possibility that it might be technological. And I think science can be fun, and we are, by getting more data from the Rubin Observatory, discovering more interstellar objects every few months. We have a very exciting decade ahead of us, and we should just, it's science is like a box of chocolate. You never know what you might get.
It's such a great way to end this podcast, and I fully agree. Thank you so much, Avi. Thank you for being rebelliously curious with me today. And I can't wait till the end of October. That's for sure.
Thanks for having me.